welcome to The Discriminating Gamer, the board game review show that has never had any illicit contacts with Russia. That okay, Vladimir? Yeah. We'll cut it in post. Today we're going to go ahead and take a look at 878 Vikings, Invasions of England from Academy Games. In 878 Vikings from Academy Games, up to 4 players take on the roles of either the Viking invaders or the British tribal defenders of the British Isles. Now, this game, of course, is it's called the Birth of Europe series. Of course, it's a play on the Birth of America series, which included titles like 1812, Invasion of Canada, 1775 Rebellion, and, of course, 1754 Conquest. And, of course, these games, as you know, these other 3 games, as you know, I just started playing earlier this year, and I've loved those other 3 games. Let's take a look and see what 878 brings to the table. The game board is a map of Britain during the Viking invasions, and I should say at this time, Academy Games, in addition to the game, also sent me some of the Kickstarter extras. I've got the giant oversized map that you'll be seeing playing with here. The actual game board map is actually much smaller than the giant oversized map we're playing with, just so you are aware of that. There are several different, of course, coasts along the British Isles from which the Viking invasions may come, but the islands itself is divided into various shires. Some of these have fortified towns. Some of them just kind of have unfortified towns. You'll notice some of the fortified towns actually have kind of symbols of figures on there. Now, some of these will have figures that you just place at the start of the game, and then some of them will have figures that you can reinforce with later. Now, critically in this game, too, unlike some of the earlier games in the Birth of America series, you don't have cubes. Instead, you actually do have little miniature figures that you place on the that you're going to be placing and moving throughout the board. Now, the base game also has cardboard standees that you use for the Viking leaders and King Henry. Here, of course, they also sent me the Kickstarters for the minis, which we were using during this game. Now, just like those other games, with the exception of the first turn, every turn you are going to randomly determine turn order. Every faction of the 4 factions, the 2 Viking factions, the 2 kind of British defender factions, they each have kind of a blank dice cube that you put in a bag. Every round you reach into that bag, you pull out one of those cubes and you place it on the board. It's that player's turn, so you never know who's going to go next. And that's going to be very important over the course of the game. Now, when the first Viking activates, they're actually going to have the leader phase. Essentially, they draw a leader card, they take that leader standee, or mini as the case may be, and it's going to say how many of each of the Viking factions go on that card. You've got, of course, the kind of the black and the red. The red are berserkers, are a little more powerful, and you put them all on the card, and then you can determine, it says where on the coast they invade, the North Sea or what have you, and then you can pick any spot, any shire there, and invade, and then start driving towards some of those strongholds. Now, after the Vikings are kind of moving inland, of course they can encounter the enemy and do battle with them. The English, the British tribes, they have a reinforcement phase where they get reinforcements in those fortified cities that it says so on the game board. After you do the reinforcement of the leader phase, what you do is you go ahead and you play a movement card. Now, you have 3 cards in your hand. You play a movement card, and the movement card tells you how many armies you can move and how far they can move. Armies are any groups of your minis, your figures, that are together, and it can include your factions or your allied factions. You can move them together. And as you move them, again, you can move them as far as the card says, up to that distance, and you don't have to move them all. But you cannot pick up and drop off units along the way. It's just whatever you've got in that initial starting area, that's what you're going to move and perhaps fight with. Once you have moved all of your units, you are then going to go to the battle phase. Now, battle is very interesting. Both the attackers and the defenders are going to roll. Now, again, as I say, like for the Vikings, you've got the berserkers, which have stronger dice, but then you have the black faction, I don't recall their name, and they've got more dice. They're weaker, but there's more. The same thing is true with the British factions. You've got one faction that's got more dice and one that's got fewer but stronger dice. Now, critically, just like in all these games, the defender rolls first. The defender has the initiative, and they are going to go ahead and roll the dice. So there are three possible outcomes with a die roll. Number one, you can roll the command action, meaning you can retreat one of your guys out of a battle, back to an adjacent space that is either friendly controlled or uncontrolled. You may want to do that if things aren't going your way in battle. You can roll a hit, you can kill one of your enemy's figures, or you can roll a flee symbol. And if you roll a flee symbol, what that means is you have to take one of your own units and place it kind of in the flee box, and then they can come back during reinforcement phase and leader phase. They can come back into the game, but they're out of that battle. After you've resolved all the movement and all the battle, then of course you go to the draw phase. Essentially, you draw back up to 3 cards. Now I should point out too, when you play your movement card, you can also play any number of event cards. There are different event cards that trigger different things across the board. You can trade out your enemy's units for your units and kind of do funky move things, and other weird things can happen when you play the event cards. Now, critically, however, you always have to have at least one movement card in your hand. If ever you draw 3 cards and they're all event cards, you have to show everybody they're all event cards, put them back in your deck, reshuffle it, and draw it till you have at least one movement card in your deck. And every turn, you have to play at least one movement card. Now, as the game moves on, as you get further and further in the game, you're going to have the king for the English is going to come out, the British is going to come out, and he is going to act like a leader for them. He'll have all these major resources, and he can drive, and he can attack them, but he's not going to come out for several turns. The English may also have the feared. The feared are a group of people that when you're defending kind of your strongholds, they come out and they also roll additional dice. They kind of fit the role that the Native Americans played in the other games in 1775 and 1754. Kind of, although they were neutral in that, here they are specifically for the English, and they play those, as I say, when their strongholds are attacked. They're kind of like a local militia. There are a few different win conditions. There are a number of Viking tokens at the bottom of the board. If ever the Vikings have, I believe, 14 cities with the Viking token on it that they control, then they automatically win. If ever there's a point in the game where they don't have any Viking control tokens on the board, then the English win the game. Now, each faction also has a treaty card. Now, treaty cards come out in the game like regular movement cards. They're regular movement cards, except at the end, when you play it, you don't discard it. You place it kind of on the treaty board. You place it, I think the treaty board was a Kickstarter thing too, so it may not, the regular one may not have it. You just place it beside it. If after all the treaty cards from one side of a faction have been played on the 5th, 6th, and 7th turn, I think, then whoever, of course, I think if who's ever got, 9 control of 9 cities, they win the game. And that's how you play 878 Vikings, Invasions of England. So 878 Vikings, Invasions of England is again, it's another game in this series of games we've been seeing from Academy Games. First of all, let me just say again about the Birth of America series. All of them are fantastic. 1775 is my favorite of that series. They're just amazing games. Amazing games. 878 Vikings, of course, continues this tradition. It's got some new mechanics here, a little innovation here. Of course, it's got the minis instead of the cubes, and I got to admit, I kind of miss the cubes. I mean, minis are great, but I don't know. There's just something about the cubes I really got on board with. But this is, again, another solid game, and it's a little bit different with the leaders, how they're just kind of tearing through the countryside as opposed to just kind of these geographic factions kind of moving from different areas. So it gives it a little more, and it's random where they come out and how they're going to enter. So it gives it a little more, I think it's just a little more unpredictability than you get from some of the other games. And I liked that quite a bit. I thought that was awesome. Again, I like the way the factions balance each other. I mean, each side, one's got fewer dice but stronger. One has more dice but they're not as strong. The same thing with the English and the feared, where the feared are like militia. They're very, very weak, but there's always a chance they're going to get some hits there. And of course, they're great fodder. That's cool. You draw a card when one of your strongholds is attacked and tells you how many of them you put out there. So it's that one's really cool too. I really like that aspect of the game as well. All told here, if you've seen my reviews for the other games in the series, you kind of know what I'm going to say. I love this game. I think this is a fantastic game. Again, if I'm going to be, perfectly honest here, my heart still belongs to 1775. That, to me, is the best game in the series so far. But one of the things that's really cool about seeing what they're doing with 878 here is seeing what directions they're going to take this system in the future. Because you know they are. You know there's going to be more historical areas they're going to mine, maybe ancient Greece, ancient Rome, American Civil War, Europe's just filled with stuff. I could see this adapted to a World War I or World War II. I'm not sure exactly how, but I think you could do it. I think that'd be stuff that'd be really cool. And I think we're going to see more and more and more of these kinds of games, this system of games, because it's a solid game. And because you don't want to keep buying the same game over and over again, just rethemed, you're going to see some of these new and innovative mechanics, and I'm sure some of them will hit and some of them will miss. By and large, most of the mechanics I'm seeing here in 878, I really enjoyed. I don't think there's any that I just, said, not for me. I really liked what I'm seeing here. Again, this is a game that, it's simple enough to learn, simple enough to play, that you can teach it very easily. I think it was Joel Eddy called 1775 the ticket to ride of war games, and that's very true. It feels very light, and this feels like a good gateway war game, but there's still enough going on that even I think veteran war gamers are still going to have fun with this game. I do. I really love 878 Vikings, like I love all the games in this series. Do you need the giant oversized mat? Do you need the minis? No, of course you don't. But you know what? They're fun. I enjoy playing with them. There's also an expansion that came with it, and they sent me the expansion as well. I've not played with the expansion, but I'm hoping to in the future. And it's just a beautiful looking game. Beautiful map and artwork, and really, really enjoy it quite as well. So the recommendation for the discriminating gamer, of course, for 878 Vikings is wholeheartedly buy it. You are going to really, really have fun with this game. Thank you once again for joining us today on The Discriminating Gamer. As always, we ask you to please leave a comment for us on YouTube, on Board Game Geek, on our Facebook page, or on thediscriminatinggamer.com. We ask you to please like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter. We are The Discriminating Gamer, and I got to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, like Leslie Nielsen, I'm in the mood for some great Viking food.
Please somebody help me on my feet again, and I don't know where I'm going, and I don't know where I've been. Please somebody help me on the solid ground. It's a long time, and I'll be dying. Once a year I wind up in the band.
I got a 33.3% chance.
You're on good.
I like these maps.
And
Oh!
Yes.
reinforcements.
Circus.